The gym was, for Finn, more than just a place to sweat out the day's anxieties. It was a sanctuary, a structured escape from the sometimes monotonous hum of his life as a data analyst. Every Tuesday and Thursday, without fail, he followed the same ritual. First, a solid 45 minutes on the elliptical, head down, music up, the rhythm of his feet a steady counterpoint to the quiet chaos in his mind. Then, a quick circuit of weights, focusing on form, the controlled burn in his muscles a welcome distraction. Finally, the sauna. Ah, the sauna. That was the real prize, the decompression chamber where the day's worries dissolved into the humid air. Finn had always considered himself a creature of habit, and not in a bad way. There was comfort in the predictable, a quiet dignity in knowing what to expect from his own small corner of the world. His apartment was meticulously organized, his work schedule a precise dance of deadlines and data sets, his friendships cherished but contained within a comfortable sphere. In his early 30s, Finn had settled into a rhythm that, while not wildly exciting, felt safe. Relationships, particularly romantic ones, had been complicated. There'd been a string of almosts and what ifs, a few intense but ultimately fleeting connections that had left him with a healthy dose of skepticism and a slight aversion to unnecessary drama. He wasn't closed off, not entirely, but he wasn't actively seeking to dismantle the perfectly good walls he'd built around his heart, either. He believed in connection, truly, but the effort it often demanded felt, well, exhausting. Today, like any other Thursday, the gym was doing its job. He'd navigated a particularly thorny spreadsheet issue earlier, the kind that made his brain feel like a tangled ball of yarn. The elliptical had helped unravel some of it. The weights had solidified his resolve, and now he was headed for the sauna, ready to let the heat complete the therapeutic process. The scent of cedar and eucalyptus hit him the moment he pushed open the heavy glass door to the sauna room. It was blissfully quiet, save for the low hiss of the heating rocks and the occasional gentle drip of water as someone ladled a scoop onto the coals. Finn nodded to the two other occupants, an older gentleman he recognized from countless sessions, always tucked into a corner, eyes closed in serene meditation, and a younger guy, probably in his early 20s, sprawled out on the lower bench, already glistening with sweat. Finn found his usual spot on the middle bench, near the back, where he could lean against the wooden slats and stare at the patterns of condensation on the glass. He wrapped his towel loosely around his waist, careful to ensure it was secure, a silent mantra of modesty he'd perfected over the years. This was his space for quiet contemplation, not for awkward encounters. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, slow breath, letting the intense heat seep into his pores, relaxing the tense muscles in his neck and shoulders. The hum of the real world faded, replaced by the steady thrum of his own pulse, the gentle trickle of sweat down his temples. This was it. This was the reset button. He was just starting to drift, to mentally sort through the remains of his workday, when the door creaked open again. Finn didn't usually pay much attention to new arrivals. People came, people went. But this time, something made him pause, a subtle shift in the energy of the room. He opened his eyes, just a sliver, and saw him. The man was striking. Not in an ostentatious, look-at-me way, but in a quiet, undeniably powerful one. He had broad shoulders, a lean frame, and a confident air that seemed to fill the space without being aggressive. Dark, slightly wavy hair was already damp at the temples, suggesting he'd either just finished a strenuous workout or had been enjoying the sauna's heat for a while already. His skin, a warm olive tone, was flushed from the heat, and a few drops of water clung to his eyelashes. He moved with an easy grace, towel draped casually over one shoulder, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips as he glanced around the room. Finn, despite himself, felt a familiar, inconvenient flutter in his chest. He quickly averted his gaze, pretending to be utterly engrossed in a particularly interesting knot in the wood grain beside him. He wasn't usually one to stare, and certainly not to actively seek out interaction in the sauna. His gym routine was about self-improvement, not cruising. Yet, there was something about this man, a quiet magnetism that made his usual detachment falter. Then came the unexpected. The man didn't head for the empty space on the top bench, or even settle down further along Finn's own middle bench, leaving a respectful gap. Instead, he walked directly towards Finn's end of the bench and, with an almost deliberate slowness, sat down. Not just close, but uncomfortably close. His thigh was barely an inch from Finn's. Finn's internal monologue went into overdrive. Seriously? There are literally empty benches. Is he dense? Or is he doing this on purpose? He felt a prickle of something that was a mix of annoyance and an undeniable, inconvenient spark of curiosity. He kept his eyes fixed on the wall, forcing his breathing to remain steady, refusing to acknowledge the man's sudden proximity. He could feel the residual heat radiating off the man's skin, a subtle musk that wasn't unpleasant, just present. Too present. He could practically feel the man settling in, the slight shift of weight on the wooden bench. Finn's heart had picked up an unwelcome pace, drumming against his ribs. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe the man was just oblivious, or perhaps he found this particular spot especially comfortable. But deep down, a tiny, rebellious part of Finn's brain whispered, "No, this is deliberate." The silence stretched, thick with steam and unspoken questions. Finn focused intently on his breathing, counting each inhale, each exhale, trying to regain his equilibrium. He could feel the man's presence acutely, a warm, solid mass beside him. It was unsettling, exhilarating, and mildly irritating all at once. His palms, he noticed, felt a little clammy, and then it happened. It was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle rustle of fabric. Finn, still stubbornly staring at the wall, registered a slight movement out of the corner of his eye, a flash of white against tanned skin, a soft thud on the cedar floor. The man's towel. It wasn't merely dropped, it seemed to have slipped, with a kind of languid grace that felt entirely too intentional. It lay there, a crumpled heap, revealing everything. Finn's breath hitched. His eyes, despite his best intentions, darted downwards, a quick, involuntary glance, and then immediately back up, as if he'd been caught doing something illicit. But he hadn't been caught. The man, quite calmly, was still sitting there, facing forward, seemingly oblivious to his sudden state of undress. Or perhaps not. Perhaps he was waiting. A searing heat, far more intense than the sauna's ambient temperature, flooded Finn's face. He could feel the blood rushing to his cheeks, his ears burning. His mind was a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. He did that on purpose. He absolutely did. No one just drops their towel like that in a public sauna, not without at least a startled reaction. And then, a different, more primal thought, unbidden and unwelcome, surfaced. He's magnificent. He clamped down on that thought immediately. This was ridiculous. He was 32, a grown man, and he was blushing like a teenager who'd just stumbled upon a forbidden magazine. He squeezed his eyes shut again, trying to regain control, to erase the image that was now seared into his memory. The outline, the shape, the undeniable evidence of masculine beauty. It was a lot to take in, especially just an inch away. He could feel the tension radiating off the man now, too, or maybe that was just his own heightened awareness projecting onto the situation. He tried to steady his breathing, but it felt shallow, ragged. He could hear the frantic drumming of his own heart, a frantic percussion against the quiet hiss of the steam. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Finn didn't dare move, didn't dare speak. What would he even say? "Excuse me, your towel seems to have fallen?" That sounded absurd. "Hey, you dropped your towel on purpose, didn't you?" Even more absurd, and entirely too confrontational for Finn's reserved nature. He wondered what the man was thinking. Was he amused? Was this a game? A challenge? Finn found himself surprisingly, disturbingly captivated. His usual caution was warring with a sudden, intense curiosity, a desire to know what would happen next. Finally, after what felt like an agonizing eternity, the man stirred. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, reaching down with a long, elegant arm. His movements were unhurried, almost languid, as if he were performing for an audience of one. Finn, unable to resist, risked another glance, a quick, almost painful flicker of his eyes. The man's fingers brushed against the towel, collected it, and just as slowly brought it back up to his lap. He didn't immediately re-wrap it, though. Instead, he held it there. Across his thighs, a momentary, tantalizing pause before he casually, almost indifferently, draped it back around his waist. It was resecured, but the moment had already been made. The message, if there was one, had been delivered. The man still hadn't looked at Finn, not directly anyway. Finn, however, felt a strange pull. He found his gaze drifting almost against his will to the man's profile. He had a strong jawline, a slight stubble, and his lips were full, relaxed. His eyes, a warm brown, were now open, gazing straight ahead, seemingly lost in thought. But there was a flicker, a slight curve at the corner of his mouth that suggested he was well aware of Finn's presence, and perhaps of the little drama that had just unfolded. Finn suddenly felt acutely aware of his own body, the way his towel was wrapped, the sweat trickling down his chest. He felt exposed, even though he was perfectly covered. The heat in the sauna, which had moments ago been comforting, now felt oppressive, suffocating. He needed air. He needed out. He pushed himself up from the bench, his movements perhaps a little too abrupt, a little too loud in the quiet space. He avoided eye contact, of course. His plan was to make a swift, dignified exit, but just as he reached for the door, he heard it. A low, smooth voice, warm and slightly husky, spoke from behind him. "Leaving so soon?" Finn froze. His hand was on the door handle, but he couldn't bring himself to open it. He felt like a deer caught in headlights, utterly unprepared for this direct address. He slowly turned, forcing himself to meet the man's gaze. The man was looking at him now, a direct, unapologetic stare. His brown eyes held a hint of amusement, a playful glint that sent a shiver down Finn's spine. A genuine smile now touched his lips, a slow, captivating curve that deepened the lines around his eyes. Yeah, Finn managed, his voice coming out a little hoarser than he intended. "Just cooling down." He gestured vaguely towards the door, then back to his sweat-drenched body, as if needing to explain why someone might leave a sauna. The man chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound. "It does get pretty intense in here, doesn't it?" His gaze lingered on Finn's face for a moment longer than strictly necessary, a silent question passing between them. "I'm Leo, by the way." He extended a hand, palm up, in a small, inviting gesture. Finn stared at the hand, then back at Leo's eyes. A moment stretched, thick with possibilities. He could just nod, offer a polite "Finn," and slip out the door. Or he could take the hand. It felt like a decision point, a small ripple in the smooth, predictable surface of his life. "Finn," he said. And without really thinking about it, he reached out and took Leo's hand. It was warm, dry and firm, a strong grip, a brief electric contact that sent another jolt through Finn. "Nice to meet you, Finn," Leo said, his smile widening, his eyes twinkling. He didn't release Finn's hand immediately, holding it for a beat longer than a casual greeting would warrant. Finn felt himself blush again, a ridiculous adolescent reaction. He quickly pulled his hand back, feeling suddenly clumsy. "Yeah, you too," he mumbled, desperately trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Well, see you around." He practically bolted out the door, leaving Leo's soft chuckle echoing in his ears. Outside the sauna, the air felt cooler, though Finn was still radiating heat, both from the steam and from the sheer adrenaline coursing through him. He practically stumbled into the showers, letting the cool water cascade over his body, hoping it would wash away the lingering intensity of the encounter. He scrubbed vigorously, trying to scrub away the images. The sensation of Leo's presence, the memory of that deliberate, provocative drop of the towel. But it was no use. The incident replayed in his mind in vivid, excruciating detail. Every second of it. The way Leo had sat down, the casual flick of his wrist as the towel descended, the slow retrieval, the lingering glance, the easy smile, the sound of his voice saying, "Leo." Finn felt a chaotic mix of emotions. Annoyance that his peaceful, predictable sauna ritual had been so thoroughly disrupted. Embarrassment at his own flustered reaction. But overriding all of it was a surprising, undeniable thrill. A jolt of excitement that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. His life, for the most part, had been carefully curated to avoid such spontaneous, unsettling sparks. And yet, here one was, undeniable, buzzing beneath his skin. He finished his shower, dried off with an almost aggressive efficiency, and got dressed, his movements a little more jerky than usual. As he laced up his sneakers, he found himself replaying the dialogue. "Leaving so soon? Nice to meet you, Finn." There was an ease, a confidence to Leo that Finn found both intimidating and alluring. Walking out of the gym, the evening air was cool and crisp against his still warm skin. The city lights blurred as he drove, his mind still fixated on the sauna. He usually spent the drive home decompressing, listening to podcasts, his thoughts drifting to mundane things like dinner plans or tomorrow's tasks. Tonight, his brain was a whirligig of what-if scenarios. What if I hadn't looked? What if I had just ignored him? What if I had stayed longer? What if I had said something witty, something clever, instead of just mumbling like an idiot? He knew, with a certainty that was both frustrating and exciting, that this wasn't going to be easily forgotten. The gym, his sanctuary, had been infiltrated. His routine, that comforting blanket of predictability, had been tugged at the edges. Back in his apartment, the quiet felt different, less peaceful, more expectant. He made himself a simple dinner, but his appetite wasn't really there. His gaze kept drifting to the window, to the city lights outside, as if searching for something, someone. He wasn't sure what he felt about Leo. Attraction, definitely. A powerful, unsettling surge of it, but also confusion. Was Leo genuinely interested, or was this just a playful flirtation, a casual game played in the steamy confines of the sauna? Finn had encountered all sorts of types in his life, and he was wary of those who seemed to thrive on ambiguity. But there was something about Leo's smile, his direct gaze, that felt different. Sincere, perhaps, despite the provocative nature of his actions. He walked over to his bookshelf, running a hand over the spines of his well-loved books. He tried to focus on the comforting familiarity of them, but his mind kept drifting back to the image of Leo, the heat, the scent, the sudden, shocking reveal. He realized, with a jolt, that he hadn't seen Leo before. Or if he had, he hadn't registered him. Finn was usually attuned to the regulars, the familiar faces. Leo felt new, a wild card thrown into his carefully structured deck. The experience had left him feeling exposed. Not physically, not really, but emotionally. He was someone who liked to keep his feelings close, to analyze them in private before presenting them to the world, if at all. But Leo had bypassed all his defenses with a single, audacious act. He'd ripped open a crack in Finn's carefully constructed composure and let in a rush of hot, unsettling air. He found himself pacing his living room, a nervous energy buzzing through him. He usually unwound with a book or a show after the gym. Tonight, he couldn't settle. His thoughts circled back to the fundamental question. Did he do it on purpose? The answer, deep down, felt like a resounding yes. The way he had sat so close, the unhurried manner of the drop, the lingering eye contact, the smooth invitation to chat. It all pointed to intentionality. And that, in itself, was fascinating. And a little frightening. What did that mean for him? Was he supposed to do something about it? Finn wasn't one to chase. He believed in mutual interest, in organic connection. But this felt different. It felt like a challenge, a dare, delivered in the most intimate of public spaces. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. His face was still a little flushed, his eyes bright with an uncharacteristic intensity. He usually saw a man who was competent, steady, perhaps a little predictable. Tonight, he saw someone who looked a little shaken, a little intrigued, and perhaps a little hopeful. He found himself wondering when his next gym day was. Tuesday, just a few days away. The thought brought with it a renewed flutter in his stomach. Would Leo be there? Would he acknowledge Finn? Would Finn even have the courage to acknowledge him back after his ignominious retreat? The thought of seeing Leo again filled him with a mixture of dread and a powerful magnetic pull. Part of him wanted to run in the opposite direction, to revert to his safe, predictable routine, to avoid anything that threatened to disrupt his carefully balanced life. But another part, a bolder, more adventurous part he hadn't known he possessed, wanted to dive headfirst into the uncertainty. It wanted to know more. It wanted to see if that playful glint in Leo's eyes held a promise, or just a fleeting moment of amusement. He suddenly felt awake, truly awake, in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. The world, which had felt a little muted, a little gray around the edges, had suddenly gained a vibrant new hue, all because of a towel, a sauna, and a man named Leo. Finn finally sat down on his sofa, pulling his knees up to his chest. He closed his eyes, picturing the scene again. The heat, the steam, the silence, the confident posture, the towel, the brief, shocking reveal, the electric touch of hands, the warm voice. This wasn't just a random encounter. He knew it in his gut. This was something else entirely. And for the first time in a long time, Finn felt a genuine, unfamiliar tremor of anticipation for what the next few days might bring. His predictable world had just gotten a whole lot hotter. Sleep refused to come for me that night. My mind, usually a quiet, orderly place, was a chaotic mess of steam, shared glances, and the unnerving, exhilarating sight of a towel-clad stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of him, casually dropping his towel, then slowly retrieving it, flashed behind my eyelids. Was it deliberate? My gut said yes, a mischievous, knowing part of me. My logical brain, however, was already building an elaborate defense, insisting it was an accident, a trick of the light, an overactive imagination fueled by too much caffeine and a recent dry spell in my dating life. But even my logical brain couldn't deny the spark that had ignited, the way my heart had hammered against my ribs, or the lingering heat on my skin that had nothing to do with the sauna's furnace. I tossed and turned, replaying the entire scene, the initial shock, the way my breath caught, the absurd urge to either flee or, well, not flee. The quick, almost imperceptible flick of his gaze towards me, a fleeting smirk that had me questioning everything. It had felt like a challenge, an invitation, a silent conversation only we were privy to. And then, the casual way he'd stood, draped his towel back around himself, and left, leaving me a sweaty, bewildered mess. I groaned, burying my face in my pillow. This was ridiculous. I was a grown man, not some flustered teenager. Yet, here I was, obsessing over a man I didn't even know, whose only interaction with me was a deliberate wardrobe malfunction. It was exactly the kind of chaotic, unpredictable energy I usually avoided. My life was structured, organized, meticulously planned. I liked routine, comfort, predictability. This man, with his dark, playful eyes and unyielding confidence, was a direct threat to my carefully constructed peace. And yet, there was an undeniable allure, a dangerous, intoxicating pull. Part of me wished I had never gone to the gym that evening. Another, much louder part, whispered that it was exactly what I needed. For months, maybe even years, I'd been stuck in a rut. Work, gym, home, repeat. Dates had dwindled, interest had waned. I'd told myself I was happy, content, but deep down, a quiet ache for something more had persisted. Was this it? A clumsy, potentially embarrassing, incredibly attractive jolt out of my complacency? I finally drifted off sometime around 3 a.m., only to wake up a few hours later feeling more exhausted than rested. The first thought in my head before I even fully opened my eyes was him, the sauna man. His image was already burned into my memory, his profile, the curve of his back, the way his dark hair curled at the nape of his neck. Damn it! The question of whether to go to the gym that day gnawed at me. My usual schedule dictated an early morning workout, but the thought of seeing him, of potentially reliving the awkwardness, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. What if he was there? What if he remembered me? What if he didn't? The latter thought was strangely more unsettling. To him, I might just be another face in the sauna, an anonymous witness to his playful stunt. That stung a little more than I cared to admit. I considered skipping the gym entirely, but that felt like letting him win, letting my suddenly fragile composure dictate my routine. I wasn't going to let some anonymous, towel-dropping Adonis derail my fitness goals. No, I would go. I would be cool, collected, utterly unfazed. I would lift my weights, do my cardio, and if I happened to see him, I would offer a polite, distant nod. Nothing more. Easy, right? Spoiler alert, it was not easy. I dragged myself out of bed, went through the motions of my morning routine, each movement feeling heavy with unspoken anticipation. I chose my gym clothes with unusual care, opting for a slightly newer, better-fitting t-shirt, telling myself it was purely for comfort. It wasn't. It was because I was an idiot who, despite all his rationalizations, secretly hoped to make a good impression, just in case. Walking into the gym felt different that morning. The usual comforting hum of treadmills and clanking weights was replaced by a strange tension, a heightened awareness that made every glance feel like a potential encounter. I scanned the floor, trying to be subtle, trying to act like I wasn't specifically looking for a very specific, very distracting person. My heart rate, usually steady during warm-up, was already elevated. I went through my chest routine, trying to focus on my form, on the burn in my muscles, but my eyes kept darting around. The squat rack, the row of ellipticals, the water fountain, no sign of him. A tiny part of me felt relieved. A bigger part felt a little disappointed. This was stupid, Finn. You literally saw him once. I moved on to cardio, hopping onto a treadmill, strategically choosing one that gave me a good view of the gym entrance and the path to the locker rooms. I set my pace, put in my earbuds, and tried to lose myself in a podcast. It didn't work. My attention kept drifting, my gaze constantly sweeping the room. Then I saw him. He was walking out of the men's locker room, clad in a sleek black t-shirt that hugged his shoulders just right, and dark athletic shorts. His hair was slightly damp, indicating he'd just showered, probably after an earlier workout. He looked even better in gym clothes, if that was even possible. He moved with a confident, easy grace that made everyone else look like they were wading through treacle. My breath hitched. My meticulously planned, cool, collected, unfazed persona evaporated like steam in a cold wind. I nearly tripped on the treadmill belt, my eyes locked onto him for a fraction of a second too long before I jerked my head away, pretending to be deeply engrossed in my non-existent podcast. My face flushed. My internal monologue spiraled into a panicked frenzy. He saw you looking, Finn. Oh God, he knows you were looking. He knows you remember. He knows you're still thinking about it. But when I risked another quick glance, he was already heading towards the free weights area, seemingly oblivious to my internal meltdown. Or, more accurately, utterly unbothered. He didn't even look in my direction. My disappointment was immediate and sharp. So I was just an anonymous face. Good. That's good, right? No awkwardness. Perfect. I tried to regain my composure, focusing on my stride, forcing myself to look straight ahead. But the knowledge that he was in the same room, a mere 50 feet away, sent an electric current through me. Every clink of a weight plate, every deep exhale felt amplified. After what felt like an eternity, I finished my cardio, my shirt clinging to my back. I grabbed my water bottle, trying to decide my next move. Should I head straight for the showers? Or grab a protein shake at the juice bar? The juice bar involved walking past the free weights. A calculated risk. I decided on the juice bar, purely for nutritional reasons, of course. My internal monologue was truly a mess of contradictions. As I approached the weights section, I tried to keep my eyes fixed forward. A slight, pleasant smile plastered on my face, as if I were in a deeply satisfying conversation with myself. But I couldn't help a quick side-eye. He was at the dumbbell rack, effortlessly curling what looked like a significant amount of weight. His muscles flexed and rippled under his shirt, a testament to serious dedication. My gaze lingered for a moment too long, drawn in by the sheer physicality of him. And then he looked up. Our eyes met. This time there was no hiding, no quick deflection. He held my gaze, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face. The same playful smirk from the sauna, only softer, more direct. My heart did a flip-flop that would have made an Olympic gymnast proud. "Hey," he said, his voice surprisingly deep, a casual rumble that cut through the gym's background noise. He paused his set, letting the dumbbells rest at his sides. My brain stalled. Hey," I managed, my voice a little higher than I would have liked. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks again. He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "You were in the sauna yesterday, right?" "Yeah," I confirmed, as if there was any doubt. "Finn." I extended my hand, suddenly feeling incredibly formal in a sweaty gym. He took it, his grip firm and warm, sending a jolt up my arm. His skin felt smooth against mine. "Alex, nice to finally put a name to the shared experience." His eyes twinkled with amusement, clearly referencing the towel incident without explicitly mentioning it. My face was definitely bright red now. "Right, the shared experience." I tried to play it cool, but my voice still had a slight quiver. "Didn't realize we hadn't actually, introduced ourselves." "Nope," Alex said, still smiling, still holding my hand a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary. "My bad, got a little distracted." He squeezed my hand gently before letting go. The warmth lingered. "Distracted, huh?" I attempted a playful tone, trying to match his easygoing vibe. It felt clumsy coming out of my mouth. "I can imagine." He laughed, a genuine, open laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. It was a good laugh. "Yeah. So, Finn, you usually hit the gym this early?" "Most mornings," I replied, feeling a little more grounded now that we were actually talking, even if I was still internally flailing. "Helps me clear my head before work. You?" "Same here. Try to get it in before the real grind starts. You work around here?" "A few blocks away," I said, pointing vaguely. "Software development. You?" "Construction management," he said, and I could suddenly picture him on a site, giving orders, surveying blueprints, looking completely in his element. "It's demanding. Gym's my escape." "Tell me about it," I agreed, a genuine smile forming on my face. It felt surprisingly easy to talk to him now that the initial hurdle of recognition was over. The sauna incident, while still a vivid memory, now felt like a shared inside joke, a cheeky foundation for this new interaction. "Well, Finn, it was good to properly meet you," Alex said, picking up his dumbbells again. "Maybe I'll see you around." "Yeah, definitely," I said, feeling a slight pang of disappointment that the conversation was ending. I wanted to prolong it, to dig deeper, to find out more about this man who had so effortlessly captured my attention. As I walked towards the juice bar, I felt a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in ages. He knew my name. I knew his. We'd had a conversation, a real one, that extended beyond the sweaty confines of the sauna. And he hadn't seemed to think I was a total weirdo for staring at him. That was a win in my book. I ordered a protein shake, my mind still buzzing. Alex. He had such an open, friendly demeanor, despite the initial playful brazenness. His smile was infectious, his eyes warm, and his laugh? That laugh was something else. I realized I was smiling into my shake, looking like a total idiot. I sat at a small table, sipping my shake, trying to dissect every word, every gesture. The way he held my hand, the slight pause before he let go. Was I reading too much into it? Probably. My internal alarm bells were already ringing, a cautious voice reminding me not to get ahead of myself, not to build castles in the air. I had done that too many times before, only to watch them crumble. My last serious relationship had ended almost 2 years ago, a slow, painful fizzle rather than a dramatic explosion. We had simply grown apart, our paths diverging until there was nothing left but polite indifference. It had left me with a quiet cynicism, a reluctance to fully invest, a fear of vulnerability. I'd built walls since then, sturdy ones, designed to keep me safe from disappointment. But Alex, with his easy charm and direct gaze, felt like a wrecking ball aimed straight at those walls. It was unsettling and exhilarating all at once. I finished my shake, still scanning the gym, hoping for another glimpse of him, but he was gone, probably headed to the showers. I gathered my things, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and longing. The day had started with a dull ache of anticipation, transitioned to a nervous flurry, and now settled into a warm, hopeful hum. The next few days became a subtle game of chance and timing. I found myself adjusting my gym schedule slightly, sometimes going a little later, sometimes a little earlier, just to increase my chances of running into Alex. It felt utterly teenage, completely out of character for the rational, pragmatic Finn. Yet, I couldn't stop myself. The possibility of another interaction, another smile, was too tempting. Sometimes our paths would cross in the weights area, and we'd exchange a brief nod, a quick smile. Other times, we'd find ourselves side by side on the treadmills, a silent acknowledgement passing between us before we each retreated into our own workout zones. Each encounter, no matter how brief, sent a flutter through my chest. He was always friendly, always easygoing, never making me feel like an inconvenience. One afternoon, I was doing my cool-down stretches when Alex appeared beside me, grabbing a mat. "Hey, Finn," he said, his voice relaxed. "Good workout?" "Decent, thanks," I replied, stretching into a hamstring pose. "You too?" "Always," he grinned. "Trying to beat my personal best on the bench press today. Almost got it." "Nice," I said, genuinely impressed. He had the build of someone who took his strength training seriously. "What's your secret?" He chuckled. "No secret, just consistency and a lot of protein. Oh, and good music." He tapped his earbud. "What are you listening to?" "Just a podcast, usually," I admitted, feeling a little less cool than I wanted to be. "Something about ancient history." "Ancient history, huh?" He raised an eyebrow, a hint of playful mockery in his voice. "Not exactly pump-up music." "It helps me focus," I defended, a small smile playing on my lips. "Keeps my mind off the burn." He stretched out his arms, his muscles defined even in repose. "Fair enough. To each their own. So, you a history buff?" "More of an armchair enthusiast," I clarified. "I like learning random facts. It's a nice escape from spreadsheets and code." "I can imagine," Alex said, nodding. "My job is all about problem solving and making sure things don't fall apart. Sometimes I just want to switch off my brain." He paused, then looked at me directly. "You know, I'm usually at the juice bar for a shake after my workout. If you ever feel like swapping notes on ancient civilizations or the best way to get a bigger bench, you know where to find me." My heart gave another familiar lurch. It wasn't a formal invitation, not a date, but it was definitely more than a casual gym acquaintance. It was an opening, a clear invitation to extend our interaction beyond brief greetings. My walls, which had been under siege since the sauna incident, felt a new tremor. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound nonchalant. "Yeah, I might just take you up on that." He smiled, a genuine, warm expression that made my stomach flutter. "Cool. Well, catch you later, Finn." He gave a quick nod and started his own cool-down stretches. I finished my stretches, trying to control the surge of excitement. He wasn't just interested in the gym, he was interested in me, in my podcasts, in my interests. That was a big step. True to his word, the next time I spotted Alex, he was indeed at the juice bar, chatting with the barista, his easy laughter carrying across the room. I hesitated for a moment, a sudden wave of nerves washing over me. What if I was reading too much into it? What if he was just being friendly? But then I remembered his clear invitation, and a quiet determination settled over me. Go on, Finn. What's the worst that can happen? I walked up to the counter, ordered my usual protein shake, and then, with a deep breath, turned to Alex. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. He looked over, his eyes lighting up. Finn, perfect timing, just about to head out. He gestured to the empty stool beside him. Mind if I join you for a minute? Not at all, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I sat down, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through me. Being close to him, hearing his voice, felt comfortable. Alarmingly comfortable. So, no ancient history today? He teased, taking a sip of his shake. Nope. Just a very intense weightlifting session, I replied, flexing my arm playfully. He laughed, and the sound sent a shiver down my spine. Impressive, he said, though his eyes lingered on my bicep for a moment that felt longer than it should have. So, Finn, tell me, beyond ancient history and code, what makes you tick? Any secret hobbies? I was surprised by the directness of the question, but it also felt disarmingly open. Oh, nothing too exciting. I like to cook, mostly, trying new recipes, experimenting. It's a nice creative outlet. Oh, a chef, huh? Alex grinned. Any specialties? I'm pretty good with Italian, I admitted, feeling a flush of pride. Pasta from scratch, that kind of thing? Wow, actual homemade pasta? Alex seemed genuinely impressed. That's next level. I mostly stick to ordering takeout or very basic microwave meals. My culinary skills are limited. He made a self-deprecating face that was incredibly charming. Well, you've got the muscles, I've got the carbs, I joked, feeling a rare looseness in my demeanor. We could be a formidable team. He laughed again, a sound that made my chest feel lighter. We could indeed. So, what about you? Any other secret talents? I dabble in photography, I confessed, surprised at how easily the words came out. It was a hobby I rarely shared, a quiet, solitary pursuit. Mostly cityscapes, architecture, things that tell a story without needing words. That's really cool, Alex said, leaning forward slightly, his elbow resting on the counter. His gaze was attentive, genuine. I'd love to see some of your work sometime. My heart pounded. He'd love to see some of your work sometime. It sounded innocent enough, but in my mind it was another subtle push, another step forward. Maybe, I said, a shy smile touching my lips. If you're ever looking for a break from construction and needing some visual stories. I think I could make time for that, he said, his smile softening, his eyes conveying a warmth that was both thrilling and a little terrifying. He glanced at his watch. All right, Finn, much as I'd love to keep this riveting conversation going, I actually do have a deadline to hit. He pushed off the stool. But this was good, really good. Yeah, it was, I agreed, feeling a genuine sense of connection. Talk soon, Alex. Definitely, he said, giving me a quick, easy wave as he headed for the exit. I watched him go, a profound sense of anticipation swirling inside me. That was it. We were past the awkward sauna incident, past the brief greetings. We were actually talking, learning about each other. There was a clear, undeniable spark, and it felt like something was beginning to build. My walk home was a blur. My mind replayed the conversation, every word, every nuance. He was charming, attentive, and he seemed genuinely interested. He wasn't just talking about the gym, he was asking about me. That was a big deal. For so long, I had felt like I was going through the motions, meeting people who were nice enough, but who never quite sparked that deeper curiosity. Alex was different. He had ignited something within me, a cautious but undeniable hope. But then the familiar doubts started to creep in, whispering their insidious questions. Is he just being friendly? Is he just a naturally outgoing person? Are you overthinking this, Finn? You always overthink things. I tried to push them away. This felt different. There was a deliberate quality to his actions, from the sauna incident to the explicit invitation to chat at the juice bar. He was putting himself out there, just as I was. cautiously, tentatively. The evening passed in a haze of cooking a new pasta dish, homemade, of course, fueled by the conversation, and then staring at my computer, pretending to work, but really just scrolling through photos on my hard drive, imagining showing them to Alex. What would he think? Would he find them interesting? Would he see the stories I tried to convey? My phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend asking if I wanted to grab drinks on Friday. Usually I'd jump at the chance for a social outing, but this time a tiny voice in my head hoped I wouldn't already have plans. Plans with Alex. It was an entirely speculative thought, born purely out of hopeful fantasy, but it was there, strong and insistent. I realized then that something fundamental had shifted within me. The walls I had built, designed to protect me, were now starting to feel like a cage. A comfortable, predictable cage, yes, but a cage nonetheless. And Alex, with his easy smile and bold eyes, was offering me a way out, a glimpse of something exhilarating and unknown. The prospect was terrifying. What if I misinterpreted his signals? What if he was just being kind? What if I got hurt again? These were the familiar fears, the well-worn pez of my emotional landscape. But this time they were accompanied by a new, more powerful feeling, a yearning to take a chance, to be open, to see where this unexpected connection might lead. I thought about the sauna again, the heat, the steam, the way he had looked at me. It hadn't been an accident. I was almost certain of it now. It had been an invitation, a challenge, a declaration of interest. And I had responded, perhaps clumsily, but genuinely. Now we were here, talking about ancient history and homemade pasta and cityscapes. It felt like the beginning of something significant, something potentially beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I was willing to risk it. I was ready to see what lay beyond the steam, beyond the casual gym encounters, beyond the comfortable confines of my own guarded heart. The thought of tomorrow, of the next possible encounter, filled me with a nervous excitement I hadn't experienced in years. My routine, once a source of comfort, was now tinged with a thrilling unpredictability. My perfectly organized life had a new, intriguing variable, Alex, and I was surprisingly eager to see how that equation would unfold. Liam's laugh was a warm current that often pulled me along, even when my own mood felt like a stubborn eddy. After our third proper date, a surprisingly competitive mini golf match where he'd somehow managed to chip a ball out of bounds and still flirt his way into winning, something in me had begun to shift. The initial guarded curiosity I'd felt, that almost annoyance at his boldness in the sauna, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, melted into genuine anticipation. I looked forward to his texts, the casual, "Hey, how's your day?" that somehow felt more meaningful than a desperate plea. But anticipation, for me, always came with a generous side dish of anxiety. It was like I had this internal auditor constantly tallying potential risks and calculating escape routes. Liam was easygoing, charming, and undeniably attractive. Too attractive, maybe. My brain, ever the pessimist, kept whispering, "What's the catch? This isn't real. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop." It was a familiar refrain, one I'd heard many times before. Past relationships, though few and far between, had always ended with a quiet fizzle, leaving me with the lingering taste of my own inadequacy. I was good at keeping people at arm's length, at mistaking independence for isolation. "So, you really think you could take me in a game of pool?" Liam had challenged me over text that Monday morning, a casual follow-up to our mini-golf escapade. I smiled at my phone. He knew I was terrible at pool. I'd mentioned it once, ages ago, in passing. It was a small detail, but it showed he listened. "Challenge accepted," I typed back, adding a winking emoji I usually reserved for my sister. A little bravado, a little playful lie. I knew he'd see through it, and somehow that felt safe. That night, we found ourselves in a dimly lit bar, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and ambition. He was leaning over the pool table, lining up a shot, his brow furrowed in concentration. The way the light caught the strong line of his jaw, the way his biceps flexed, subtly under his t-shirt as he aimed. It was distracting. I felt a familiar flush creep up my neck. I was trying to focus on the game, but my gaze kept drifting. He sunk the shot with a satisfying click, then looked up, catching my eye. A slow, easy grin spread across his face. "Your turn, hot shot." I fumbled with the cue stick, suddenly self-conscious. "Don't call me hot shot. You know I'm terrible." "That's okay," he said, walking over to me, his presence warm and encompassing. "I'm a good teacher." He reached out, his hand gently settling on mine as I gripped the cue. His fingers were long and warm, and a jolt went through me. "Hold it a little looser," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my skin. He adjusted my stance, his body brushing against my back. My breath hitched. The air between us crackled, thick with something unspoken, something electric. It wasn't just physical. It was an awareness, a heightened sense of being. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest against my shoulder blade, the scent of his cologne, subtle, woody, and undeniably masculine, filling my senses. My mind, for once, went delightfully blank. I missed the shot, spectacularly, sending the cue ball careening into a corner pocket. He chuckled, a soft sound close to my ear. "Maybe we should skip the lesson for now." He straightened up, but didn't move away completely, lingering just a little too close. He then gently took the cue from my hand and racked the balls for the next game. The moment stretched, full of unspoken things. We ended up talking more than playing, perched on high stools by the bar, nursing lukewarm beers. He told me about his family, a boisterous clan from the Midwest who loved to gather for holidays and make too much noise. He talked about his dreams of opening his own physiotherapy clinic, how he envisioned a space that felt less sterile and more like a community hub. His eyes lit up when he spoke about it, a genuine passion shining through. I found myself opening up too, surprising myself with the details I shared. About my quiet childhood, growing up with just my mom and sister, always feeling a bit like the observer. About my job in graphic design, which I loved, but sometimes wished pushed me more creatively. I even found myself mentioning a past relationship, something I rarely did. It was brief, a short-lived fling that had ended amicably enough, but still left me feeling exposed and clumsy when it came to intimacy. Liam listened intently, his head tilted, his gaze steady and warm. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice, just listened. It was a rare and comforting feeling, to be truly heard. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. "Sounds like you've always been a deep thinker, Finn, always watching, always processing." His insight surprised me. It felt like he saw something in me that I usually kept hidden, even from myself. "Is that a good thing?" I asked, a hint of vulnerability in my voice. He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "It's just you. And yeah, I think it's a good thing. Means you're not just going through the motions, you actually feel stuff." That night, walking me back to my apartment, the air was cool and crisp, a welcome contrast to the warmth that had simmered between us in the bar. We stopped at my doorstep, the silence stretching comfortably. He leaned against the doorframe, his hands tucked into his pockets, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I had a really good time tonight, Finn," he said, his voice low. "Me too, Liam," I replied, my voice a little softer than I intended. My heart was thrumming, a nervous little bird trapped in my ribs. I wanted to invite him in, but the thought felt too big, too soon. My apartment, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a place too fragile to expose to this new, vibrant presence. He must have read something in my eyes because he didn't push. Instead, he just looked at me, his gaze searching, tender. Then, slowly, he reached out, his hand gently cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed along my jawline, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down my spine. My breath hitched again. His eyes were warm, dark pools, reflecting the streetlights. He leaned in, slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. His lips were soft, warm, and tentative at first, just a gentle press. Then, as I leaned into it, a soft sigh escaping my lips. They became more confident, more lingering. It wasn't a demanding kiss, but an exploratory one, full of quiet promise. It tasted of beer and something uniquely Liam, a subtle spice, a hint of mint. My hands, which had been frozen at my sides, slowly lifted, finding their way to his waist, gripping the fabric of his shirt. When he pulled back, just barely, our foreheads rested against each other. His breath mingled with mine, warm and sweet. "Good night, Finn," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Good night, Liam," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. He gave my cheek one last gentle stroke, then straightened up. A final, lingering look, and then he turned and walked down the steps. I watched him go until his figure disappeared into the shadows of the street. I closed my apartment door and leaned against it, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. My lips tingled, a ghostly warmth lingering. That kiss. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a statement, a gentle crossing of a threshold I hadn't realized I was ready for. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. My internal auditor, usually so vigilant, was strangely quiet. The days that followed were a blur of work and a constant undercurrent of thoughts about Liam. His texts became more frequent, more intimate. We shared mundane details, what we had for lunch, a funny thing a client said, but also deeper thoughts, late-night conversations, stretching into the early hours. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone else, not even my sister. Little anxieties about my work, a childhood memory that had always bothered me, a fear of never truly connecting with someone. And he listened, always listened, responding with a quiet understanding that both soothed and unnerved me. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't offer platitudes. He just validated my feelings, making me feel seen and accepted. It was a novel sensation, and I found myself craving it, like a parched man craving water. About a week after the pool hall, Liam suggested we cook dinner together at his place. "I make a mean carbonara," he boasted, sending a goofy selfie with a bowl of pasta. My stomach did a flip. Cooking for someone, in their space, felt like a significant step. It was domestic, intimate, vulnerable. I hesitated, my internal alarm bells finally ringing loud and clear. "Too fast, Finn. Too much. You're not ready for this. You're just going to mess it up." But then another part of me, a small, hopeful part, whispered, "Maybe this time it's different. Maybe he's different." "Okay," I typed back, trying to sound nonchalant, "but I'm bringing the wine, and don't burn the pasta." His apartment was surprisingly neat, though it had a lived-in feel. Bookshelves overflowing with textbooks and novels, a worn but comfortable-looking sofa, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of herbs. He greeted me with a wide smile and a casual hug, his arms wrapping around me, drawing me close for a moment that felt both familiar and brand new. My face heated, but I leaned into it, letting myself melt against him. We stood side by side in his kitchen, chopping vegetables, the clatter of knives on cutting boards filling the comfortable silence. He was surprisingly adept, moving with an easy confidence. I, on the other hand, was a bit clumsy, nearly dropping a tomato. He laughed, a soft, indulgent sound, and gently took the knife from my hand. "Let me," he said, his fingers brushing mine again. That electric current, always there when we touched. He finished slicing the tomatoes with quick, precise movements. "You can stir the sauce." As I stirred, the rich aroma of garlic and pancetta filling the air, I watched him. He was humming softly, totally absorbed in the task. There was a genuine joy in his movements, an easy grace that fascinated me. He felt safe, not in a boring, predictable way, but in a way that made me feel like I could finally let down my guard. "So, Finn," he said suddenly, without looking up, "what's your biggest fear?" The question caught me off guard. My hand froze on the spoon. It was such a direct, intimate question, so different from the usual, superficial banter. My first instinct was to deflect, to make a joke. But looking at the gentle curve of his back, the way his shoulders tensed slightly as he concentrated, I felt a strange urge to be honest. Being alone, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Truly alone, I mean. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like I'm watching life from behind glass, unable to really connect. He stopped chopping, turned, and looked at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I regretted saying anything, feeling that familiar pang of vulnerability. But then he reached out, wiping a smudge of flour from my cheek with his thumb. "You're not alone, Finn," he said, his voice soft, almost a murmur. His eyes held mine, a silent reassurance passing between us. "Not anymore." The simplicity of his words, the quiet conviction, hit me with an unexpected force. A warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the chill of my old fears. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. It was an invitation, an affirmation that felt deeper than any passionate speech. It was an unspoken promise. We ate dinner at his small kitchen table, the carbonara rich and creamy, just as he'd promised. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from silly anecdotes to more serious topics. He told me about a difficult patient he'd helped, a woman who'd lost hope, and how seeing her regain her mobility had been the most rewarding experience of his career. I shared a story about a particularly challenging design project that had tested my patience, but ultimately resulted in my proudest work. We talked about our respective passions, finding common ground in the dedication and joy we both found in our work. By the time we finished, the dishes were piled high in the sink, and the evening had settled into a comfortable ease. We moved to the sofa, both of us tired but unwilling to let the night end. He put on some soft jazz, and we just sat there, side by side, his arm casually draped over the back of the sofa, my shoulder occasionally brushing against his. The quiet, shared space felt more intimate than any loud club or fancy restaurant. It was in these silences, these moments of simple proximity, that I felt our connection deepening. It was in the way his presence calmed me, how I could just be myself without feeling the need to perform or impress. He eventually turned to me, his gaze gentle. "You know," he started, his voice a low hum, "that day in the sauna, I didn't just drop my towel on purpose because I thought you were hot, though you definitely are." My cheeks flushed, a surprised laugh escaping my lips. "Oh? What was it then, Casanova?" He smiled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I saw you watching me, not in a creepy way, just curious. And I got this feeling, this weird gut feeling that there was something intriguing about you, something quiet but intense, and I thought, I want to know more about him. And the only way I knew how to get your attention was to be ridiculously, unapologetically me. And yes, a little provocative." He shrugged, a sheepish grin. "Guess it worked." My heart swelled. The honesty, the vulnerability in his confession was disarming. It wasn't a conquest for him, it was a genuine curiosity, a deliberate attempt to connect. And the fact that he saw something intense in my quietness, rather than finding it boring or standoffish, made my chest ache with a sweetness I hadn't felt in a long time. "It definitely worked," I admitted, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. His arm instinctively came around me, pulling me closer. The jazz music played softly in the background, a soothing soundtrack to the moment. We stayed like that for a long time, not talking, just enjoying the physical closeness, the quiet comfort of each other's presence. It was in these moments that I felt the barriers I'd built around myself slowly, gently crumbling. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, but a subtle erosion, like water wearing down stone over time. Eventually, the soft light of his living room grew dim, the streetlights outside casting long shadows through the window. I felt myself drifting, lulled by his warmth and the rhythmic beat of his heart against my ear. It was a sensation of utter peace, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing until now. When I finally stirred, it was much later. Liam was asleep, his breathing even and deep. I carefully disentangled myself from his embrace, pulling a blanket over him before quietly gathering my things. I paused at the door, looking back at him. Even in sleep, there was a gentle strength to him. I wrote a quick note on a napkin. Thanks for dinner, the talk, and for seeing me. See you soon. I left it on his coffee table, a small gesture that felt significant. Walking home in the pre-dawn quiet, a sense of lightness filled me. The night air was cool, but I felt warm, a deep, comforting warmth spreading through my entire being. It wasn't just the memory of his kiss or the feel of his arms around me. It was the feeling of being truly seen, truly heard, truly accepted. It was the understanding that someone understood the unspoken language of my quiet heart. My internal auditor was still there, lurking in the background, but its voice was softer now, less insistent. For the first time in a long time, the prospect of vulnerability didn't feel like a threat, but an invitation. An invitation to something real, something deep, something that felt like it had the potential to truly last. The silence of the streets felt less lonely, filled instead with the echoes of his laugh, the warmth of his touch, and the quiet promise of what was yet to come. I was falling, slowly but surely, and for the first time I wasn't afraid to hit the ground. I had a feeling Liam would be there to catch me. And even if he wasn't, I was starting to believe I might just be strong enough to pick myself back up. But the thought of him not being there was a fleeting one, because something in my gut, a feeling much like the one Liam had described about me, told me he was here to stay. And that, in itself, was a revelation. The rain lashed against the large bay window of my apartment, a relentless symphony that had been playing since dawn. It was the kind of gray, blustery Saturday that usually sent a shiver of melancholy right through me, making me want to curl up with a book and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But today, even the most persistent drizzle couldn't dampen the warmth spreading through me, a warmth that had less to do with the thermostat and everything to do with Leo, currently humming softly in the kitchen, making what he called his fortification brunch. We'd been together for what felt like both an eternity and a blink. Since that audacious, towel-dropping day in the sauna, our lives had woven together with an ease I never thought possible. We'd navigated the tricky waters of moving in together, met each other's friends, and, to varying degrees of success, our families. My parents, bless their hearts, had been cautiously accepting, mostly just happy I was happy, though they still occasionally stumbled over pronouns. Leo's family, a boisterous and openly affectionate bunch, had welcomed me with open arms, something that still, at times, felt overwhelming in the best possible way. Everything was good, more than good. It was profoundly, wonderfully right. Yet, there was a low hum beneath the surface of my contentment, a faint, discordant note that resonated whenever our conversations drifted to forever, to what's next, to the kind of irrevocable commitments that felt like stepping off a cliff. My heart wanted to leap, to dive headfirst, but my mind, ever the cautious gatekeeper, clung to the edge, whispering warnings. "Coffee's ready, love," Leo called out, his voice a rich baritone that always managed to chase away a bit of the gloom. He walked into the living room, a mug in each hand, his dark hair still tousled from sleep, a slight smile playing on his lips. He was wearing an old faded t-shirt of mine, a ridiculous band tee from my college days that he'd somehow adopted as his favorite sleep shirt, and a pair of worn-out sweatpants. He looked utterly comfortable, utterly himself, and utterly at home. My home. Our home. He handed me my mug, the ceramic warm against my fingers, and settled onto the sofa beside me, pulling his knees up to his chest. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of his soap, a subtle mix that had become intrinsically linked with safety and belonging. "Thanks," I murmured, taking a slow sip. The silence stretched, comfortable and familiar, punctuated only by the drumming of the rain. We watched the water run in rivulets down the glass, blurring the urban landscape outside into an impressionistic painting. "You're quiet today," Leo observed softly, not looking at me, but at the window, as if reading my thoughts in the falling rain. His perceptiveness was both a comfort and a challenge. He saw through my carefully constructed shields, not in a demanding way, but with an unwavering, gentle gaze that invited honesty. "Just thinking," I admitted, turning the mug in my hands. "About us. About everything." He shifted, turning his head to meet my gaze. His eyes, usually sparkling with an easy humor, held a deep, unreadable question. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" he asked, his voice low, careful. I swallowed, the coffee suddenly tasting bitter. "Neither, I guess. Or maybe a bit of both. It's just a lot, you know?" He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The forever talk," he supplied, his tone surprisingly devoid of judgment, only empathy. It wasn't the first time we'd skirted this topic. We'd been living together for 6 months now, and while it was wonderful, the unspoken questions about the future sometimes hung heavy in the air, especially after a particularly romantic evening or a friend's engagement announcement. "Yeah," I confessed, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "It's just big and amazing and utterly terrifying." He reached out, his warm hand covering mine, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. "Terrifying how, Finn?" His simple question opened a floodgate I'd been trying to keep shut. It wasn't that I didn't want a future with Leo. God, I wanted it more than anything I'd ever wanted. But the concept of such permanence felt like signing a contract in blood, an irreversible step that brought with it the specter of all the past hurts and disappointments I'd endured. I'd seen relationships crumble, watched friendships fade, felt the sting of promises broken. My own family history was punctuated by a divorce that had left scars, visible and invisible, on everyone involved. I'd grown up internalizing the idea that nothing truly lasted, that everything eventually ended. It was a cynical, self-protective mechanism, but it had served me well, or so I'd convinced myself, keeping me from getting too invested, too vulnerable. "It's just, what if I mess it up?" I finally managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "What if I'm not enough? What if we aren't enough when things get hard? What if it all falls apart?" The words tumbled out, each one carrying the weight of years of unspoken anxiety. "I know it sounds stupid. Because I love you, Leo, I truly do. More than I thought I was capable of loving someone. And that's exactly what scares me. This feeling is so immense, so vital, and if I lose it, if I lose you, I don't know if I could recover." Leo listened patiently, his gaze unwavering, his hand still warm and steady on mine. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to offer platitudes. He just listened, absorbing every fear, every insecurity, every raw emotion I laid bare. It was this capacity for quiet, steadfast presence that I adored about him, and it was also what magnified my fear of losing him. He was the most significant, the most grounding presence in my life. "I've always been good at keeping my distance, you know," I continued, looking down at our intertwined hands. "Even when I thought I was close to people, there was always a part of me held back, a safety net. You broke through all of that, Leo, from the moment you sat way too close in that sauna, with that cheeky glint in your eye, and then, well, you know. You dismantled my defenses piece by piece, and I let you. I wanted you to, and now I'm here, completely exposed, completely open, and it's exhilarating and terrifying all at once." I looked up, meeting his eyes, my own probably wide with vulnerability. "It's like I've finally built this incredible, beautiful house, brick by brick, with you. And now you're talking about adding another floor, maybe a whole new wing, and all I can think about is a storm coming and sweeping it all away, and I hate that I think like that. I want to be like you, so full of optimistic abandon, so brave. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched Leo's lips. Optimistic abandon? He repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice, but no mockery. Finn, that's not abandon, that's just hope, belief in us. He squeezed my hand gently, then shifted to face me fully, pulling his own mug onto the coffee table. He reached out and cupped my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. His touch was electric, familiar, comforting. You're not going to mess this up, Finn, he said, his voice firm, resolute. And you are more than enough. You're everything. And we are enough. More than enough. We're spectacular. His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me. They were a balm to the agitated, fearful corners of my heart. But the fear wasn't fully quelled. It was a deeply ingrained pattern of thought, a protective shell built over decades. But life happens, I argued, my voice barely a whisper. People change, feelings fade, circumstances shift. Leo's gaze held mine, intense and unwavering. Yes, life happens, and people change, but that's precisely why we have to choose to keep choosing each other, every single day. Love isn't just this lightning bolt moment, Finn. It's the constant, conscious decision to stand by someone, to weather the storms, to grow together, even when it's uncomfortable or scary. It's not just about the good days, it's about navigating the bad ones too. And I choose you, every single day, in every way imaginable. He paused, then continued, his voice softening. You said I broke down your defenses. You know what you did for me? You showed me what it truly means to be loved, to be seen, to be cherished. I've had relationships before, of course, but there was always a part of me that felt not fully there, not fully understood. With you, it's different. It's like finding the missing piece I didn't even know I was looking for. You are my anchor, Finn. You ground me. You make me better. You challenge me to be more. And yes, sometimes that means you challenge my optimistic abandon with your wonderfully thoughtful, cautious realism. And I need that. We need that balance. His words painted a picture of us, not as two halves completing each other, but as two distinct, whole individuals, creating something entirely new and stronger together. He wasn't dismissing my fears, but acknowledging them, and then offering a hand, inviting me to step forward with him, not blindly, but with purpose and shared resolve. And about that towel incident, he said, a playful glimmer finally returning to his eyes, a welcome flicker of the cheeky Leo I first met. That wasn't optimistic abandon, Finn. That was calculated risk. I saw something in you, something I wanted to get closer to, something worth taking a chance on, and I haven't regretted it for a single second. A shaky laugh escaped me, a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Calculated risk, huh? So you did drop it on purpose. He grinned, a full, dazzling smile that always made my heart do a little flip. What can I say? I'm a man who knows what he wants, and I wanted you. The simple, direct honesty of his confession, coupled with the playful jab, was exactly what I needed. It reminded me that our beginning, while unconventional, was rooted in a genuine, undeniable attraction that had deepened into something profound. So, he said, his smile softening, his hand still on my cheek, his thumb gently caressing my skin. What will we do with this amazing, terrifying, wonderful thing we have? What's the next step for us, Finn? I want to build that extra floor with you. I want to keep adding wings. I want to build a whole goddamn castle. But only if you're ready. No pressure, no expectations, just an invitation. His openness, his lack of demand made it easier. The pressure wasn't on me to provide the right answer, but to simply be honest about my own desires. And my desire, underneath all the fear, was unequivocally him. a future with him, a life intertwined with his. I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the sheer enormity of my feelings wash over me. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, a comforting backdrop to the quiet revolution happening inside me. "I want that castle, Leo," I whispered, opening my eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. He immediately wiped it away with his thumb. "More than anything, I don't know how to stop being afraid." "You don't have to stop being afraid entirely, love," he said gently, his voice thick with emotion. "You just have to be willing to take the next step anyway. With me, we face the fear together. We build that castle together, knowing that storms might come, but we'll have each other to hold on to when they do, and we'll have all the strength we've built, brick by brick, moment by moment, to lean on." He shifted again, pulling away from my face slightly, his eyes searching mine. "I'm ready for that, Finn. I'm ready for all of it, and I promise you, I'll be your anchor, through every storm, big or small, if you'll be mine." His vulnerability mirrored my own, and it was a powerful, moving thing. He wasn't asking me to be fearless. He was asking me to be brave with him, to trust in our shared strength, in our love, to face whatever the future held. It was an offer of partnership, of unwavering support, of a shared journey. "You already are my anchor, Leo," I confessed, my voice clearer now, the tremor almost gone. "You have been for a while now. I just needed to finally admit it, to myself, to you." A profound sense of peace began to settle over me, a quiet understanding that permeated every fiber of my being. It wasn't an instant eradication of all my fears. Those were too deeply ingrained to vanish in a single conversation. But it was a monumental shift. It was the realization that fear didn't have to dictate my choices. Love could. And this love, with this man, was worth every single terrifying leap of faith. "So, what does this next floor, this new wing, look like?" I asked, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips, a smile that reached my eyes. "What's the blueprint, architect?" He laughed, a joyful sound that filled the room, chasing away the last vestiges of gloom. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead, then to my temple, then lingering on my lips. It was a kiss full of promise, of tenderness, of a deep, abiding love that felt like coming home. "Well," he murmured against my mouth, "I was thinking about a trip first, to that little cabin upstate we talked about, the one by the lake. Just us. And maybe, while we're there, we can talk about forever in more concrete terms. Like, rings. Or something that symbolizes how much you mean to me, how much this life we're building means to me. Something that says, I'm in this, Finn, for good." My breath hitched. Rings. The word hung in the air, weighty and beautiful. It wasn't a proposal, not yet, but it was the promise of one. The promise of a commitment that went beyond shared rent and morning coffees. It was a tangible expression of the future he saw for us, a future I now unequivocally wanted to build with him. "A cabin by the lake sounds perfect," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. And rings. I like the sound of rings, or something that says for good. Because I'm in this too, Leo, for good. He pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around me, holding me tight against his chest. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling his scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my ear. The rain outside continued, but it no longer felt gray or blustery. It felt like a cleansing, a gentle reminder that even after the heaviest downpour, the sun would eventually break through. We spent the rest of the day in a haze of quiet intimacy. Brunch became a leisurely affair, filled with light chatter about the cabin, about our dreams for the future, about silly anecdotes that made us both laugh. We cooked together, my cautious precision balancing his intuitive flair. We curled up on the sofa again, no longer heavy with unspoken fears, but light with shared hopes, watching an old movie. I found myself reaching for his hand often, needing the reassuring contact, needing to feel the tangible proof of his presence. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the apartment, Leo excused himself to make tea. I stayed on the sofa, bathed in the soft glow of the lamplight, a sense of profound contentment washing over me. I thought back to that sauna, to the audacious, playful act that had started it all. Who would have thought that such a simple, cheeky move could lead to this? To a love so deep, so encompassing, that it had reshaped my entire world. The man who had once been a thrilling, slightly dangerous stranger, the man who had dared to drop his towel and shatter my carefully constructed walls, was now the very foundation of my life. He was the safe harbor, the steady hand, the unwavering heart. He was my anchor, and I, finally, was ready to sail into forever with him, no matter what storms might lie ahead, because I knew, with absolute certainty, that we would face them together. Leo returned with 2 steaming mugs, a warm, knowing smile on his face. He sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders and pulling me close. "To us," he murmured, clinking his mug against mine. "To us," I echoed, my voice soft, full of a quiet joy. The future, once a daunting, uncertain prospect, now stretched before us, an open road we would navigate together, hand in hand, heart to heart. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Not really. Because with Leo, I knew I would always find my way home.